play my intro video for our live show, but we don't need that right now. Why is my connection unstable? Weird. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're recording locally and then uploading as we go, so that shouldn't be a big deal. One more thing. Alexa, flame on. Thank you. There we go. Okay. That's how I turn on my light.
It's nice.
The one for above my desk here, I ask it to send Gondor aid, so it lights up the beacons. So
that's great.
So, yeah. So the way the show operates is we'll start off with a brief introduction of you. We'll jump into some quick questions, and then you'll know that we're getting to the end when I ask you what I call our silly question. And just when we get to the end, you'll be given an opportunity. If there's something you need to promote, want to talk about that we haven't hit through the course of our conversation, please feel free to take that time and use as much of it as you need. And then when we say goodbye to the audience, don't hang up right away. I just need to see where we're at in the stream of conversation, okay? And as far as the upload is concerned, okay? Right. And if it's not fully uploaded by the time we're done, I'll have a link for you to be able to upload off of this website. So
cool.
So you don't have to sit here all day and look at me. So it'll be fun. So
no problem.
All right. Any questions before we get started, or?
I don't think so. I noticed there is a little bit of a delay between our responses, so I'm going to try and take that into account so we're not always cutting each other off.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if that's just because of distance or what's going on, or if my signal seems to be jumping all over the place right now. So that's weird. But one of the things that should be helpful is that we are recording locally, and that usually allows us to sync things up in post. We'll fix it in post. So I might have to employ the use of I've been doing most of our editing lately, but this might be a job for Super John. So
I record like a little podcast. It's more like recording a call with my brother every once in a while where we talk about movies, and I don't do any of the editing. I won't listen to the final episodes. I'm just like, here's my audio. I don't want to think about it.
Have fun. I used to be that way. I used to, and then John and his wife had some medical things come up, and so I had to step up so we could keep posting. So. Good times. So I learned on the fly, trial by fire.
I think that's how I learn most things.
All right. Right? Yeah. Trial by fire. Just jump into it, see what happens. Worst thing that can happen is I can fail utterly and everybody will hate me. But other than that, it'll be fine. So. All right. So if there's nothing else, we'll just jump right into this and we'll just have fun.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the FSF PopCast. I am Tim. I am your host, and I am reminding you that this is the show made by nerds for nerds. So welcome to our nerdery. Today we are still in blurred out construction hell because that's what we do over here. We take our sweet time, but it's coming along. And if my wife wouldn't kill you, I'd totally unblur the camera and show you everything, but I like life. So anyway, our guest today is a writer. She's a co-host of a podcast called Failurepiece Theater, which I'm very interested in talking to her about. She's also the community manager for Arrowhead Game Studios. That's the fine folks who have brought you democracy through Helldivers 2. And I am quite a fan of the Helldivers franchise. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But if you want to find out more about Helldivers 2, and that you should check out our written interview, which is going to be coinciding with this interview. That'll be over on couchsoup.com. And there'll be more fun, more specific Helldivers stuff over there. Today, we're just really excited to talk with Katherine Baskin. So, Katherine, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and you have such a cool podcast. It's just an honor you would want to invite me. So, yeah, thrilled.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we want to talk to people of all walks and what they do, and you have a really cool job there at Arrowhead, and your involvement in looking back over your origin, looking back at that and seeing some of the things that you've been involved with video game wise has been very cool for me. So I'm like, oh, she's going to be fun to talk to. So speaking of origin stories, we're like I said, we're nerds here. We love a good origin story. So, what is the origin story of Katherine Baskin, the community manager of Arrowhead Game Studios?
Oh gosh. Well, I had kind of a roundabout journey to get into games. I have my whole life dreamed of working on video games. I think, that people my age, I'm 38 years old. A lot of people my age kind of grew up with that pipe dream because we all love video
Mm-hmm.
games. But it's interesting. My love of games and like what I loved about games kind of started with my love of movies. We were a real like entertainment, like multimedia family. We loved video games. We loved movies. My dad is a huge film buff and a gamer. My brother too. And my dad's like obsession with movies was to study credits. So we would watch a film and we were always the family left in the theater watching the entire credit scroll at the end of a film. And my dad loved like pointing out names that he recognized. He loved, saying, "Oh, that's the director of photography on this movie and this movie and they work on this." And it got me to like pay attention to who makes the things that I enjoy. Um, you know, from the books that I read, of course, that's an easy one, the author's name on the cover. But then it started to carry over into games. I remember this moment that I played Maniac Mansion for the first time, and that game is like famously really cinematic. It has this great opening scroll with like movie like names that scroll across the top of the screen, and I see names like Ron Gilbert and David Fox, and I'm like, oh, these are the people who made this thing. And it kind of started like this interest in games, but like who makes the games that I love. So that kind of started the passion, I guess, but it took me forever to come to this career. I did the university thing. I studied writing, and then I ended up teaching for a while, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do that, but it was a fulfilling job, and I tried to stick with it. And then I think a lot of people had their lives change around the time of the pandemic, and I am certainly also one of those people. I started helping out some friends of mine, people that I met, years and years ago on the internet, had started making their own games, and they made a game called Ion Fury. And they reached out to me and said, like, could you help us with community and like writing for the public? And we don't have anybody who does that, and please help. And that was my foot in the door. And yeah, that's kind of an origin story, kind of. There are other parts to it too, because I think I'm in community because
Hey Google,
I've
are
been
you connected to the internet?
If I'm answering, then I have an internet connection and I'm ready to help. What can I do for you?
Can you hear me? Oh no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened
No,
there.
that's fine. That's fine. It's
My whole computer
internet.
went. Yeah. I had a new MacBook update today, and I think that there's a fly in the ointment somewhere.
What's no problem?
So, I'm not even really sure where I lost you.
I can take that one again if you want. That's
Yeah. I think we're gonna have to do that. Yeah, that was that went. The last thing I remember was something about your dad looking at you guys watching the
movie credits.
the movie credits. So yeah, past that, I don't know what you said or anything. So I apologize.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, that was fun. Okay, so yeah, if you don't mind, we'll start right back from the top of that question. Just start that question
Sure.
over your answer, and we'll just kind of go from there. And wherever, see how good you are at your memory.
Okay, so my origin story. I guess it starts with movies. I loved video games. We're like a really, multimedia loving family. It was just
Right.
my parents and my brother and me, and we love video games and we love movies. But my dad is a film buff. He really loves movies, and we were always the family left in the theater at the end of the movie watching the credits scroll. And to this day, I still do it. I have a hard time leaving a theater when the credits are still rolling.
Love it.
Because his obsession was like finding names and finding people who were connected to other films that he had seen. And he was the guy with like Leonard Maltin's movie guide sitting next to his chair and looking up everything that we watched and saying, this got this many stars, it has these people. So that was like his obsession, but he passed it on to his kids. And we, especially me, took it into video games. And I have this really clear memory of playing Maniac Mansion for the first time, and that game is really cinematic. I played it on the NES, so it's very old, but I remember it has this really like cinematic opening where it has movie credits that scroll across the screen, and I remember taking note of the names of people who made this game, and it kind of kicked off this interest in the people who make the games I love, and I kept that habit, and I started seeking out like game developers. Once I had an internet connection, I started searching for like game devs online. I wanted to know more about them, know more about how to make video games and who actually does it. And then in 2001, a game called Max Payne came out, and it was my obsession. I mean, it's still kind of my obsession, maybe less so now that I'm a grown woman. But at 15, I was crazy about it, and I did my normal thing. I beat the game, and I was like, this is changing my life. I love this. Of course, if anyone watching hasn't played Max Payne, please go play it. But it's if you love comic books, if you love Hong Kong action movies, if you love bullet time, it's all of that. And then the credits scrolled at the end of the game, and I'm like, these people have really strange names with lots of extra vowels and like umlauts and stuff. Where the hell are these people from? And I joined in earnest my first like online game community, which was the one for Max Payne. It was run by their publisher at the time, 3D Realms. But I had like one goal. I wanted to find the people who made this game, tell them that I loved it, tell them it changed my life, and learn more about like what they do and how they do it. And back then, I think it was a little bit easier to get to know a game developer. It's a little bit more guarded now. I mean, I work in the industry,
Sure.
so I get it's a lot bigger. But I did find them, and I must have been like the most annoying person. I imagine they must have just cringed when they saw me coming, because I was emailing. I'm like in their DMs. I'm like, tell me more about how you made Max Payne. But the really special thing about Remedy Entertainment is they loved it, I think. Because when Max Payne 2 rolled around, I guess I had made enough of an impression, along with a bunch of other people in the community, that they gave me a shout out in the game. So I had I have an Easter egg in Max Payne 2 that has my nickname, Baskinator, on a wall. And I think I was
cool.
just I was so determined after that. I was like, I want to be involved in game communities and I want to do this. I love this. But the industry was a lot harder to get into then. There were no clear inroads. It was almost like you had to know somebody or you had to be willing to develop all of these extra skills that I didn't have and I still don't have. Like programmers, love those people, geniuses, but I'm not one.
No.
So I had to put that dream on the back burner, and I taught for a while. I mean, I've had so many crazy jobs. I've done web design. I've been a teacher. I've been a tax preparer. I've worked in cafes. I mean, I've had all kinds of roles. And then some friends of mine made a game called Ion Fury. These were friends that I met in the Max Payne community. So I've known them since 2001.
Okay.
And they made Ion Fury. It's a retro throwback shooter made with the same technology that gave us Duke Nukem 3D, the build engine.
Okay.
And they're an incredible team, but they're not like public facing guys. They reached out and they said, would you help us with community, with social media? Would you just help talk for us? Because we suck at it. We just don't want to do it. So that's how I broke in. And that was in 2020 officially that I took that role. And yeah, that was how I broke in. I guess that is the origin story of why I'm here.
That's a very cool story, actually. I love that your dad was like just so in tune with what was going on with movies, and that you guys have caught on with that. That's a really cool thing to have been passed on. I mean, I sit and watch the end credits of movies for a lot of different reasons. I've never really thought about like picking out to see if this guy was on that movie that was involved in that movie and all that. That's a really, honestly, I think that's kind of a cool thing to do. Especially if you start picking out their name, if you start recognizing some of the names.
Yeah. And I remember I think initially when I was very small, I just really wanted to impress my dad if I knew like actor names.
Sure.
So that's, I really locked in, and I am the type of person now I can sit through credits and like pick out, recognizable names. Like my brother and I are the type of geeks that were like, I love that director of photography, like just the most pretentious nerds on the planet.
I say, Muffy, did you notice who the director of photography was? Love it. Okay, no, that's cool. I honestly, I think that's a very cool thing. I've noticed over the years, and mostly because of this podcast, I start talking with different people, and they'll talk about different costume designers and different people who are working on sets and doing set design and things like that. So I've actually looked for people's names that they have mentioned, and then I start especially if they were doing something in one of the fandoms that I frequent, like, oh, okay, so they worked on this one. I wonder if this set looks kind of similar to that one. I wonder if they had anything to do with that.
Exactly. I feel like that gave me such an appreciation for like other disciplines, things that most of the time you could be invisible in a movie, in a game, in anything.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like because of that, I'm a little bit more interested in like craftsmanship and performances and finding like all of these hidden skills. Because, when it comes to movies, there's just an incredible amount of talent that has to come together and coordinate to make a movie happen. Games honestly are the same way. But in there are differences between those two industries. I hate the comparison of like games and movies, but here I am doing it. But yeah, I feel like that made me just more aware and more appreciative of all of the different, things that you can possibly know how to do, and all of this obscure knowledge that, if we don't pay attention to the people who know how to do these things, eventually we might lose that knowledge. We might lose those skills. So I think about that a lot.
I think that's great. I think anytime we can pay attention to the people who help us bring our art is always a worthwhile endeavor, because it's more than just the people that we see on the camera. And I think that's, again, one of the things I've come to learn and I really appreciate even more throughout the course of this podcast, interviewing different writers and actors and voice actors and whoever else has been willing to put their careers on the line by coming on this show. But having that appreciation for all the things that go on in the background, the things that don't get recognized on camera, or they are on camera, but you don't know who did it until you get to the credits. So I always think it's a good idea to be able to pay attention to those things. And speaking of appreciating the arts, you are also a podcaster. We talked about that in the intro. And you are the co-host of a show called Failurepiece Theater, which I love the name, by the way. I think that's fantastic. But for anyone who's not familiar with the show, could you explain what the premise of the show is and what you and your brother, who has a fantastic name, cover?
My brother and I are so close, like just unbelievably close. He's my best friend. He's kind of just always been there. He's older than I am. He's 7 years older than I am. And we have a really great rapport, and we share so much. We have so much in common. When the pandemic happened, I mean, the pandemic changed a lot of people's lives in a lot of big ways, a lot of small ways.
Yeah.
But we were just suddenly unable to see each other, unable to be together and like hang out. And he said, everybody else is starting a podcast. Why don't we start a podcast? Why can't we do that? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Why not? So we started with really terrible equipment. If you go back and listen to our earliest episodes, the audio is bad. It's all bad. I mean, it's just an audio podcast.
I understand that.
Yeah. But we love to talk about movies. We're not like a catch up and talk about our lives kind of people.
Sure.
So our premise is we pick a movie and we watch it independently, and then we come together and we try to decide, like, is this movie a failure piece? Like, is it maybe not a great movie, but should you still watch it? So we're not picking, Martin Scorsese films. We're picking things that are a little rough around the edges, maybe things that were not successful, maybe, projects that didn't quite land, maybe they just weren't at the right time. And we just evaluate it together. We reevaluate the movie together, because oftentimes it's movies that we've seen before. And then we get together and it's just a brother and sister being unhinged on a really long audio call. We've built up like a really small, stable of listeners. And we're happy to just chat and let people in on the chat. I feel like it's an intimate, thing that we're letting people in on, because, it's a brother and sister just goofing off together. But I think people like the back and forth that we have. Like you can sense the relationship that we have in the call. So that's Failurepiece.
No, I like that. It's funny to me when I hear somebody else say, "Oh, if you go back and you listen to our early audio," so this isn't the only podcast I had. I've had two other podcasts, and one of them was called Focused on Forward. That was my very first one. That was the result of my daughter was in the hospital for just under 100 days back in 2019. And so she's a chronically ill child, and she's doing as good as she's ever going to do. She's doing pretty good. She's off across state right now visiting family and friends for a couple weeks. But so part of that, the reason I did that is I needed to kind of like work through my own things and stuff. But I started doing the podcast, talking to people over a call talking to them like this into my cell phone, and not realizing that wasn't the best way to do it. And then I moved to the ear pods with the inline microphone and holding the microphone up to my mouth. Yeah, it's probably about 6 or 7 episodes till I finally realized, I should probably get a proper microphone for this. And the sound quality difference between those first couple episodes and when the light bulb went off in my brain that maybe I should have a microphone.
I started with, the snowball mic. I think that's like everybody's first that they go and buy. And then when I moved to Sweden, I immigrated to Sweden in 2021 to work for Arrowhead. My partner, who's in the games industry, is an audio designer. So our apartment is full of microphones. Like full of microphones. So the first thing he did was say, you don't want to use that anymore. I think you should use this, and gives me like the podcaster microphone. And I'm like, oh, this is what they have in all those YouTube videos. So I get constant compliments that my audio always sounds great. Oh, your voice sounds great. Your microphone's so nice. I'm like, yeah, I didn't have anything to do with that.
I showed up.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a great gig if you can get it. Tell him if he needs extra cuddles, I can come to Sweden, and well, let them know that I'd be happy to snuggle somebody for a microphone. So yeah, no, that's great. And I do dig the premise of it. And I always love podcasts like that where it's clearly a nice conversation between two people, and you can tell there's a close friendship or relationship, and I think that's always a little bit of fun. It adds some flavor to the conversations. It's more than just a golly, did you like this movie? I sure did, Tex. What did you think? So, but yeah. Okay. So you'd also mentioned growing up on playing different games on different consoles and a couple different things. Now, I have a couple different consoles that when I was growing up were very important to me. I grew up, I'm 48. So when I started off gaming, it was with the I had an old ColecoVision, and kids, if you look that up, that's a really old, very simplistic gaming system. I also had Intellivision. You can look that up. It's pretty much the same thing. But the one that really changed my world and my viewpoint of gaming was, of course, the Nintendo, the original NES home system. And playing the game Dragon Warrior for me was like, oh, I love that game. And if I could find that game again, I had it for a little while, and I don't know what happened to it. It's like one of those things, just between marriage, 3 kids, and umpteen dogs, something has happened to it. I'm not sure where, but I've been looking, but every time I find that game, it's like crazy expensive, and I'm just
retro games are so expensive.
Yeah.
Like every once in a while I get it in my head that I want to buy an old game that, I might think I still have a copy of that, and then it's like $300. I'm like, it's okay.
I'm famously cheap, so I'm having a hard time splitting my wallet open to crack out a card for that. So here's my question for you, Catherine. Growing up, were you more of a console or a PC gamer? And if it was a console, which one was like, this is the one?
Ooh, let's see. Because we're both, like, our family is both.
Sure.
My dad bought an Atari 2600 in 1979.
Nice.
Under the pretense that it was for the baby when my brother was not born yet.
But of course,
it was not for the baby. It was him. It was for him.
It was educational.
Yeah. Just, So then my brother was born. He is immediately like video games. So it was Atari 2600 was the introduction. And then I came along in 1986. And I remember from the time I could like open my mouth, from the time that I could ask for things, I wanted a game system in my room. By then my brother had the NES. And I really wanted that, but he's like, no, this is mine. You can't have this. But he gave me the Atari 2600. So like that was my first introduction to playing a game on my own. And I still have a really soft spot for 2600 games. They're really special. But then, we had Nintendo consoles. I loved NES. Eventually, I got that as a hand-me-down. So I would say we were a Nintendo family first.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to the age about maybe 9, 10. I wanted a computer because that was like Windows, games,
Right.
computer games and graphics. And my family did not have a lot of money. And consoles were much more affordable. Nintendo consoles were famously affordable. So my parents could, scrounge that up for Christmas for us. But a computer, I mean, those are thousands of dollars. And eventually I had a relative who had, disposable cash, got a new computer and was like, "You don't have a computer? Well, that's a crime," and gave me a 386. I think this was like mid 90s, maybe 96. So this was an old computer by the time I got it, but it didn't matter.
I remember the 386.
Oh yeah. It didn't matter. It was mine. And I immediately started like tearing it apart, finding parts that I could put in it to upgrade it. And I was, cannibalizing other computers. I think I went through like 3 different systems, just taking parts from garbage piles.
Love it.
And my brother had, kind of helped coach me in how to put a computer together. And then Christmas 2000, he bought me and built me a gaming PC. And it changed everything. He painted the case my favorite color. And it had, I still remember the specs on this computer. It was an AMD Duron 700 megahertz. I had a 3DFX, like a Voodoo 3 card in it. It was as top of the line as I could have ever wanted. And I think that has just like made me a PC gamer for life. I love PC games. I have consoles now. I have a PlayStation 5 back there. I have not turned it on in forever because I just love my PC. I am hooked for life.
I get that. So I've migrated into being an Xbox player over the years. I was always on a console. I never really liked PC gaming when I was younger, mainly because there wasn't a good controller that went with it, and I never could quite master the WASD. I was horrible at it, and I honestly I'd sit there like Frankenstein looking at a keyboard. Hit button. Why am I losing? And I would just get so mad at it. But I would have no problem playing, console games. So that's kind of where I hung my hat for the longest time. And one of the things I like now is that a lot of the games that you can get for the console actually work well with a controller. And side note, that's where I play Helldivers, is because I play it through Steam because I'm an Xbox guy. So, there's my Xbox controller. But I spend most of my time. I haven't even turned on my Xbox probably in about 6 months because I've been playing either my games through Steam, or I'll play a little bit on every now and then through the Xbox gaming app, the Game Pass app. But other than that,
we're so spoiled for choice now. I mean, it just, you can turn on any device and you can have a video game to play almost immediately.
It's crazy. I mean, I would have killed for this when I was a kid.
Yes.
I mean, my parents didn't have a lot of money either, so I didn't have my own gaming system until I was in my 20s and I had moved out. Up until then, I would go down and once again, I'm dating myself on this, but we would go down to the video store and rent the gaming system and take it home for the weekend. And my parents knew that if that was in the house, that you were getting 0 out of Tim for that weekend.
Yep.
Nothing else was going to happen because I had, I was a kid with a part-time job and not a lot of money. And if I was going to put my money into something, I was getting my money's worth out of it.
Yeah.
And playing on a little 13-inch black and white TV, baby. Oh yeah. Good times.
Definitely. And my mom actually had a part-time job working in a video store for a while, and she got to rent consoles for nothing. I mean, it was like a few dollars and we could take a console home. And that was during PlayStation 1 era. And I
Nice.
really wanted a PlayStation. I mean, I'm just one of those people, like, I want all the game systems. I just wanna have them. Even if I don't turn it on that often, I wanna have it.
Sure.
Um, so we would rent the PlayStation, and then I would just do nothing but get horror games because the PlayStation had all the survival horror games.
Mhm.
So I would bring home, like, Silent Hill, Resident Evil, Resident Evil 2, and then that was
Oh, yeah.
my
I remember
life.
nightmares from those games.
Yep.
Silent Hill scared the crap out of me.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
Absolutely scared.
I don't know what it says about me. I love horror movies. I just can't get enough of that, and I think I just like being scared.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I had and this is going to be a horrible name drop, but I'm going to do it anyway. So in speaking with Dee Wallace, she was the mom from Cujo, and
Uh-huh.
you know, we talked about that. You know, what people get out of horror movies, and you know, and she talked about how actually most people who are into horror movies have an advanced fight or flight response, and they're predispositioned to be able to handle certain situations better. But she's also found, and I don't know that there's any like corroborated research with this, but she mentioned that she finds that people, you know, who watch horror movies are typically a little happier because they're dealing with their frustrations in a healthy way instead of actually you maybe acting out on them. There, here it is, and they get their scares, they get the chance to yell, they get a chance to be excited, all these different things because it's on the movie, not in real life.
I I kind of agree with that. I find
Yeah,
watching horror movies really cathartic. I mean, I think anyone who works in community for games is just a naturally anxious person. It just attracts anxious people. Um, so, I am anxious all the time. But I'm also like really happy go lucky. And I don't know, horror, it feels like it just cleanses me of any extra anxiety. It feels like I just get it all out of my system and I feel better.
yeah. You know, for me, in talking with her, I was like, yeah, you know, I'm really not, because I've never really been the horror movie guy. And then she's like, well, there's a difference between a horror movie and a slasher movie.
That's true.
And I went, oh, because I was lumping them all together. And she's like, no, there's a definite difference between the two. I'm like, because I like psychological thrillers where I have to do some thinking, and
Yes.
you know, and there's the obligatory half dozen jump scares that send my heart back into arrhythmia,
Yeah.
and you know, and all these different things. And she's like, no, that's good. She goes, you don't have to like the slasher movies. There's a lot of people who like slasher movies for various number of reasons, but there's a lot of people who really enjoy the psychological thriller side of the horror genre. And I'm like, oh, I'm a horror fan, and I did not know it.
And
So,
I like those kinds of films more as well. I mean, I like some slasher films, but it tends to be the classic ones. Like the first Halloween. I mean, I'm a
sure.
massive John Carpenter fan. Who doesn't love John Carpenter? Um, I the first Friday the 13th, I mean, I could take or leave that, but it is, it's good. Um, but psychological horror, I don't know, like, if a movie goes deep, that's what I really like. I think of
Mhm,
movies like Jacob's Ladder,
mhm.
where that's always, anytime somebody says, "I love Silent Hill," I'm like, "Have you seen Jacob's Ladder?" Because that's the most Silent Hill a movie has ever been. So yeah, that's the kind of horror that I prefer. Like,
Okay.
I have a friend who has a full-on, like, Art the Clown tattoo on
Oh,
his
interesting.
arm. And I'm like, really? Like, that's your guy?" And he's like, "I love those movies, but I don't get it at all,
Hmm,
but I support
okay.
it."
Hey, more power to him. It's not for me, but more power to
Not
him.
for me, not for me, but you know what? I love you for that.
Awesome. Well, you know, actually leads really nicely into my next question for you, because part of what we do here is nerd about other people's fandoms and share that happiness with them. So like for me, it's always Star Wars. I am I'm a massive Star Wars nerd. I have fanboyed on this show more times than I want to admit. just with some of the folks that have come on the show and some of the conversations we've been able to have. But so for you, is there a fandom that you follow, whether it's in the horror genre or something else, that means that much to you? Obviously, we talked about Max Payne earlier, but
Max Payne is the big one. Remedy games, like I follow everything that they do. I would say that that's like my primary fandom, I guess.
okay.
I'm a huge fan of their creative director, Sam Lake. I think he's awesome. One of my favorite writer. Maybe he's neck and neck with Stephen King though, because that's another fandom that I'm really into. I love Stephen King. And I took a lot of crap for that when I was an English major, because it was like so mainstream to love Stephen King. But I'm like, no, he's going to go down in history for being like super influential. You wait.
And he will.
He will. He already has. I feel like the public is finally
sure.
getting on board with Stephen King being a legend. I was a massive Star Wars fan. I would say like I still love Star Wars. I am not as embedded into it as well, my brother is. If there's a new Star Wars release of any kind, I guarantee you on podcast night, before we hit record, we will have spent like an hour and a half of him telling me about the new Star Wars thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I still really love I know, like as soon as you invited me on this, I'm like, oh, this is a Star Wars podcast. Like I'm really excited to share this with my brother, because he's gonna be like, yeah, that's basically me. Star Wars. So I love it, but I wouldn't say like I'm as crazy about it as I was when I was younger. Of course, we were also big into Star Trek, and I still have a really soft spot for everything Star Trek.
Sure.
Star Trek was one of those like franchises that shaped my morality as a person, like shaped my opinions on things. Like I can't credit those TV shows and those movies enough for making me have like a more open mind and a more open worldview, I guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say those are maybe the biggest ones, but I'm also really into everything surrounding Silent Hill. I mean, this past release of the Silent Hill 2 remake was like being a kid again, and going back to the first time I played Silent Hill 2, which was also foundational. So yeah, I think those are the big ones. Certainly Max Payne. People know me for Helldivers, or they know me for Max Payne. There's really kind of no in between. And I'm a massive fan of Helldivers. Anybody you ask who has met me, I totally drank the Kool-Aid on our own game. I just think it's so great. Like, so I'm a massive fan of Helldivers.
I don't know what's going on. I've never dropped out of an interview once, let alone twice. Oh, okay.
No worries. That my answer still works. So
yeah, no, it was great. Left off at the last thing I heard was drink the Kool-Aid of our own game, and then everything went black.
that was pretty much it. Yeah, I'm
okay. Cool. Yeah, for me, Helldivers has been just it's been a really wild ride for me, because I think for me originally it was just the immediate comparison of, oh, you're killing bugs. Obviously this is Starship Troopers, and it is so much more than Starship Troopers. And you can make the comparison. It's a very easy comparison if you want to, but that's about as close as those two things get, is that there's some bugs and you can kill them. and then there's all the rest of the things that happen. And yeah, I when I bought the game, I remember I bought because I got burned by a game called that what was it called? Apex? No, not Apex. What is it? Started with an A. Anthem. That was the one. Anthem. I went out and bought the $120 pre-order special, and me and all my buddies were so excited about it. And then, yeah, that was not the game to spend $120 on. Yeah. Anyway,
and long it's and a short, shame. It was a beautiful game.
It really was, wasn't it?
Gorgeous production.
There was so much potential.
Yeah,
that was hard. Potential.
That was really hard. And that was Anthem was a game that I kind of carried in my heart when we were planning for the Helldivers, release and the community and everything, because I thought that's an example of like what I don't want to happen to us. We have a beautiful game. We have all these opportunities. Mm-hmm. I don't want this to be our fate. So I'm relieved that it's not. But I also, I still think about Anthem like what could have been.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it's sad because every once in a while I'll be scrolling through the Xbox app and I'll see Anthem on there in the free-to-play cloud gaming. And I'm like,
sad.
Oh. Every once in a while I have gone back in just to play it, just to kind of fly around in my suit and, and just think of all the things that could have been.
Yeah.
But ever since then, it's left me with a little bit of PTSD about games. And so like when Helldivers, my buddy was trying to talk me into Helldivers, and I was finally like, fine, all right, I'll spend the money. So I bought like the lowest entry level version of the game that I could buy. I'm like, and since then I'm like, well, it's time to buy some more stuff. And next thing
Another
I know,
war bond.
I'm like, well, time to buy some more war bonds because I got Daddy needs a new suit. Yeah, it's been impressive how much more money Arrowhead Studios has gotten out of me because the game is so good. And I think that that's a lesson for a lot of gaming studios out there, is that if you make the game good, we're willing to spend our money. It's just, make it a good content, make it good quality.
As far as like the stuff that we sell in the game, of course, it's war bonds. I really have to credit we have like Helldiver names for a lot of our studio things. So our war bond and like weapon design team is called the Ministry of Defense, because that's what it's called in the game. But our Ministry of Defense team is incredible. I mean, the kinds of like fantasy items that they dream up that people, want to carry in the game. Like, it's just, I can't even fathom how some of these things start as like, an idea. I want to make a gun that does this. And then they just see it through. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful and it's fun, and people are willing to spend money on it because it's so much fun. So they're an Absolutely. Incredibly talented group of people.
And too, for your developers, give them a kudos for allowing the level of shenanigans that they have allowed to happen in this game. It is a beautiful, fun thing. When I'm in with a full group of friends, we got a full fire team and we're running around, especially with that new Hellbomb backpack. The fact that I can set that off on somebody and run away.
I do all of the PlayStation blogs for our War Bond releases. And I love doing those because I don't always get to play test things, all the way through. Like, I won't get to play with every item before it's released. So I will sit with like the list of the released items, and I find myself just like giggling because I'm trying to write this blog and I'm like, this is really cool. I can't wait to play this. And it got to that Hellbomb backpack and I'm like, I need to play. I need this. This is so fun. So most of those blogs, they feel a little bit unhinged by the time I'm done with them. I'm glad that they get accepted and they get published, but it's just me sitting at my desk like, this is great.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, I've read a few of your blogs, and it's very much fan written, and I love that. I love that it's not just. And you will notice in this backpack that you have the ability to carry a Hellbomb. Have fun, kids. It's not like that. It's it's very much of wait till your buddy sits down. You can push the button and run away. It's I do like that aspect. So for me, that's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you've been a fun read for me.
Thank you.
But let's talk about your position just real quick at Arrowhead Game Studios. We talked about being the content manager and what you do there, but we're also in an age where representation means more, and it should mean more, and it's about damn time. And I always love it when I see companies that are doing what they can to provide representation. So for you, and more importantly, Arrowhead Studios, what is Arrowhead doing to positively affect the gaming industry, which can sometimes be seen as the boys club or a man's world behind the scenes, and sometimes even on the screen, the game itself?
Yeah. Interestingly, I mean, Arrowhead is a growing company. We're certainly bigger than where they started with Magica, which was, just a few people who started as friends. But even from the start, women have been part of like Arrowhead's journey. And that stuck out to me when I applied for the job originally. You look up pictures of the people who make the game and, who are they? What are they like? And I love that Arrowhead hires women, and we also have a lot of women in our leadership, which is really, really nice.
Nice.
It's not just all of the community roles are women. It's lots of them, and we also have a ton of diversity in just about every other way you could think. I mean, something that I really love is that we have people from everywhere. And I feel like that is something that makes Helldivers a better game, because we're not just one type of person in the studio. We're not just one type of origin story in the studio. We're coming
Love
from
it.
everywhere. And, the growth of the studio has really incorporated like all kinds of people. So I feel really lucky to be one of those women that gets to work on this game. But I also love that it's a company full of all these different types of people. That feels really good. And of course, it's great to live in Sweden, and it's great to live in a society that has fair labor laws and practices, and it's very progressive. It's very, very forward thinking. It's a good society to live in.
Nice. Okay. Now, guys, if you're still with us and still watching and paying attention and enjoying the chaos that is the FSF PopCast, remember to find the rest of our interview talking about some of the other things that are Arrowhead Studio and Helldivers 2 specific on couchsoup.com. You'll find more from Katherine there. But before we, try and let her go live her life or do anything, I want to ask her another couple questions. We're almost done, I promise. So one of the things we also mentioned at the outset, though, was your work as a writer. And now, most notably, I mentioned this not just because you mentioned the work for the PlayStation blog, but also your work on a new magazine called FearZine, which is also, I bring that up because of another Couch Soup alum, Dan Morris, is heading that up and doing some writing on there too. So what can people expect from FearZine, and what do you envision your articles from FearZine to focus
on? It is a magazine that is entirely to uplift, I feel, indie horror games in particular. We don't necessarily limit ourselves to just very, very small games. We'll go to maybe like AA games.
Okay.
But I love that the focus has always been to check out these smaller projects. Because we live in an age where it's what, $100 to list your game on Steam, and it's opened up this new world for people to share their games. Of course, we have itch.io, where people are able to upload games and make money off of them. But one consequence of that is they get buried. I mean, you go to Steam and you try to look for a new game to check out, and there's so much. Like, it's so overwhelming. And what I love about the magazine is that we're willing to dig in and hunt for those diamonds in the rough and give them a bit of a spotlight. I think it's wonderful, and I love the the old school magazine approach. I think that's really exciting to me, and it's something I think we've kind of moved away from, sadly. Just because print media and even blogs kind of fell out of fashion for a while, but I really feel like it's time to bring that back. I love a good long form review. I love the features that we write. And I think, my role there, of course, I struggle to like fit in all the things that I want to do in my day. But I'm kind of committed to make time for this because it lets me sit down and actually play a game that otherwise I might have never heard, seen. And then I get to just do some fun writing. I get to really dig in with, things that aren't PlayStation blogs, things that aren't work related. I can kind of unplug a little bit, but still use that skill. So yeah, I love to write features for the magazine. I did one that I was really proud of, where I got to interview an indie horror creator who makes adventure games called Desert Fox. That was really fulfilling. It was like this massive interview, and I just love Dan just gives you the space to kind of chase that dream. Like, you want to write a feature, write the feature. He's an incredibly supportive editor. I'm a big fan of Dan.
Yeah, I've enjoyed working with him and bouncing some ideas off him. I've done a couple podcasts with him, and he's allowed me to grace his camera space with him, and I've had a lot of fun with him. He's a good dude. Yeah. So I wish you guys nothing but the best on FearZine. So I'm hoping that just takes right off and becomes a big thing. I think it has potential for that for sure. So, all right, Catherine, we have one more question for you.
Oh boy.
We call it our silly question. Ooh. So now, typically, I have a co-host, and her name is Kathleen, but Kathleen could not be here today. So the reason I bring that up is because the silly question came about because Kathleen was out with her 5-year-old daughter, and somebody asked her 5-year-old daughter a question, but didn't ask it of Kathleen. And Kathleen's response was, "How rude." And then we started thinking about it more and realized there should never be a time when somebody doesn't ask you this question. Ooh. So here it is. Katherine Baskin, what's your favorite dinosaur?
A Triceratops.
We're like besties. I just know. So
finally, Triceratops lovers.
I'm also a Triceratops fan.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, the story behind that is growing up, I've always loved rhinos. I think rhinos are just wonderfully cool animals. And as a kid, I was really into rhinos, and then there was these Triceratops, and I was like, 3 horns, that's a triple rhino. And it just kind of took off from there. So
I think for me it was Land Before Time.
Sarah, yeah.
Yeah. I fell in love, and I was like, that's the best dinosaur. Oh yeah, that movie break your heart. Oh
yeah. There's some trauma from my youth I haven't outgrown. So. Awesome. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for being on the FSF PopCast today. Where can our listeners and viewers go to find out more about you and your work?
I am on just about every social media platform due to my work. And you can find me by putting in Baskinator, because that's been my nickname since the 90s. And you will find me. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, everywhere. You can also find me strapped into the Helldivers 2 Discord server with nearly 1 million of our most dedicated fans. And you can also look for me on Failurepiece Theater. You search for Failurepiece Theater. It'll pop up on all the podcast streaming sites.
Perfect. We'll put some links down below so people can have quicker, easier access to finding all the cool things that you write and you're doing and all that. And guys, this seems like a perfect time to remind you that giving the FSF PopCast a follow is the most important thing you can do to help ensure we get more amazing guests like Catherine here to come here, tell their stories, and have funny moments for you to be able to listen to. So please give us that follow here on YouTube. It's going to help us well more than we can ever really tell you. And be sure to go check out Katherine and everything that she's doing as well. You won't be disappointed in her stuff. She's a lot of fun to follow. Trust me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Again, Katherine, thank you for being on the show. Thank you to everyone for listening and watching the FSF Popcast. And until next time, may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper for democracy. And 3, 2, 1, we are done. We don't need to play that. We'll just hit end recording. There we go.